moving on to Brick from 2005. And as I said earlier in the introduction, it's a movie in which Joseph Gordon-Levitt channels his inner Jiggy. I just kept thinking, hey, it's Jiggy in a movie.
Unfortunately, I don't look nearly as cool as he does.
Don't be so hard on yourself. Anyways, his character goes on this investigation by infiltrating this intricate high school drug dealing operation in an effort to find out what caused the death of his ex-girlfriend, whose body he stumbles upon early in the movie. This is a movie that a lot of people seem to praise, and I've tried watching it so many times ever since it came out, and I've always been intrigued by it, but I've never been able to get into the movie whenever I watch it. And I think a big part of that is that this is a movie in which people rarely shut the fuck up, at least for a good portion of the movie. And it's hard to follow what's happening because there's just so much dialogue all over the place. But I did watch it again last night, or at least I don't think I've ever made it from start to finish trying to watch this movie in the past, but last night I did, and I actually had a pretty decent time with it. Still wasn't great, but I feel like the more and more I watch it, I could potentially enjoy it more, just because I can't keep up with all the dialogue that's going on. And so I guess the more I watch it, the more I'll pick up from all the dialogue, and eventually at some point, maybe when I'm 60, I'll actually know everything that's being said in the movie.
Yeah, just to actually follow up on that, so I'd never heard of this movie before. So when I first saw the plot before I actually chose to watch it, I'm like, oh hey, that sounds mildly interesting. I can enjoy a good high school mystery if it's done well. I didn't even notice Gordon-Levitt was in the movie until like after I picked it. But it sounded like it had potential, and I started watching it. So for like the first 20 minutes, I was just really confused. Something just seemed different about this movie, and it didn't even hit me until like, let's say 25-ish minutes in. But a lot of the dialogue is it uses a lot of phrases and such that isn't necessarily in a normal vernacular. A lot of like sayings and an interesting use of words, something that you might expect from like an extreme version of this would be like a Clockwork Orange, which just makes up words. This one you can understand the flow of conversation, but it just sounds like one of those old crime detective movies from the 1950s at times. So there's just a lot of interesting and like I said, somewhat clever dialogue in this movie, and I'll probably point out a few of them later, but it definitely gives the movie a unique feeling. So even if you aren't a giant fan of the direction the movie takes and have some problems with the story itself, I do appreciate like the feel it was going for.
Yeah, and I guess in addition to feel for the movie, I guess the theme music they've got in the movie, which they play in different variations, it's another thing that kind of stands out to me. It's just one of those movies where you hear the music and ultimately, like, I could pinpoint like what movie that music belongs to. So I guess it stands out to some extent.
Yeah, it was a sort of a nice, almost melancholic sort of tone to it, which suits the mood of the movie too. I mean, it's a bright movie because it takes place like in a sunny, I'm assuming California town. So it's nice, bright and sunny most of the time. But the themes it deals with are pretty dark, and even the ending itself is pretty bittersweet. You don't even necessarily get a good gauge on what a quote-unquote victory would even be in a situation like this.
That's right.
And it's also worth noting that my high school experience was slightly different than this guy's. So.
You don't quite have the same fetish for getting punched.
Although I will say I thought the fight scenes were refreshingly decent. I mean, I like how this guy's the protagonist, but he fights pretty dirty at times, so kudos to him.
He got into that fight with that football player pretty casually. He's like, yeah, okay, let's do this.
Yeah, and the guy, I'll be honest, I haven't seen a whole bunch of movies with Joseph Gordon-Levitt in it, but I really enjoyed his performance here, even though his character isn't something I completely understand. I did enjoy his character here, and I think well, obviously he's easily the best character, the best actor in the movie. But then you have the guy who played, I think it was Brain, who's some actor named Matt O'Leary. The name I don't particularly know, but he was also, I think, pretty enjoyable, mainly because I thought he had some of the best quotes in the movie, and I always enjoyed anytime he popped up.
Yeah, it was only just before we started the show that I looked him up because there's something about him that just kept, like, there's something familiar about him. And I do recognize him from two movies. One is a movie that I actually give a 10 out of 10 to, which is Death Sentence. He plays the punk that kills Kevin Bacon's son in the movie. But then also, he's one of the two boys from Frailty. Which is not necessarily a movie that I love, but I know a lot of other people do, so that's where he's from. But yeah, there's quite a few actors in this movie that, you know, I've seen them before. Like, even the, I don't remember her name, but, you know, the one that, let's just say she's there at the end with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. Even her, I was like, I've seen her in something before, and I look her up, and I'm not really noticing anything she's in, and I notice she's in American Pie 2, listed as girl at the party, or something like that. Like, obviously she's in the movie for like 10 seconds, but I immediately recall what scene she's from, where she's like one of the girls making fun of Jim and his internet video, where he's like, "Oh, Nario, don't go, splat."
That is an impressive American Pie memory.
Well, I do tend to just watch those movies a whole bunch, like just in the background. I can put it on and do other things and kind of just giggle at it. So I've seen it probably more times than anyone needs to.
Yes. I have nothing to say to that.
Yeah, but yeah, no, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, he's you know, he's a talented actor. He's even directed movies, and you know, he's I mean, I first saw him in TV show Third Rock from the Sun, so, and he was, you know, a young teenager in that movie, so he's certainly come a long way, and you know, he's getting huge roles, and yeah, no, he's good.
Yes. So I just want to just point out one of the scenes. Well, I enjoyed a lot of the scenes later on in the movie, a decent amount. There's a character named The Pin, who's like the local, like, I was going to say Big Boss Dracula guy, but he's like, what, 15 maybe? I like his like cane and trench coat, by the way. It's a beautiful look. Anytime you see a teenager walking around with a cane, just cracks me up. But hey, here's Fancy. But this is a scene early in the movie before we meet the character, in which the main guy, Gordon Levitt, is talking to this brain guy, Matt O'Leary, talking about the Pin. To, you know, and the brain just mentions that he may be a myth. Nobody's ever seen him, and he has the line, "If you got half your rat in town together and said, show your hands if any of them have actually seen the Pin, you get a crowd full of pockets." And it's that type of dialogue. It's sort of reminiscent of, like I said, the hardboiled detective type movies. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with the Max Payne games, somewhat early 2000s games I played on Xbox, but it's just, again, same type of dialogue that has a very unique feel to it. And even though I didn't love the movie overall, I really appreciated whoever the hell wrote the script, because I thought it was a very unique stylistic addition to the story.
Well, speaking of drawing parallels to games and things like that, it did remind me of one of my favorite games as well, a game called Broken Sword, which is essentially a game in which you're just going from person to person, asking questions. You're trying to find answers to essentially something that happens right at the start of the game, which is basically a clown who blows up a cafe in Paris. So it just reminded me a lot of that game, because it's a game which, you just go around, you talk to everyone you can find, trying to get clues and answers, and eventually moving on to the next part until you get to the eventual conclusion to the story. And that's more or less what this movie felt like. He's going around talking to this person, that person, every person he can find, trying to somehow edge his way towards closer getting the answers that he needs.
And also, it's impressive that this guy was able to do that without dying, because this guy got really screwed up throughout the movie. Like, he passes out twice. I mean, at any point in like the last 25-30 minutes, this guy could have just dropped.
And he's lucky he didn't get run over by the car earlier in the film. So
that was a beautifully tense scene. And actually, that's another thing, now that you mention it, that might be worth bringing up. But the character driving the car there, I think the guy's name is Tag. But, for the most of the movie, he's just like this, thoughtless muscle, But then he gets a little bit of character toward the end, and I found that not necessarily surprising, but I found it somewhat refreshing. So, again, nice choice for this movie.
Yeah. So with Brick, it's a movie that I think I'm warming up to it. It's a movie I've tried watching so many times before, and like I said, there's just so much dialogue to try and interpret, and some of it just kept going over my head, and the more I try to watch it, I guess I gain a little more traction in actually understanding and enjoying the movie. It's still quite a bit convoluted, but I'm getting there. I'm getting there. So I can see myself potentially still enjoying this even more than I did this time, but for now, I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, so this is a movie that at first, the first 15 minutes in, I really wasn't able to get into. I'm not sure what it was. I guess, like I said, the whole vibe just felt off, and I wasn't fully catching what was going on. And it's something very important that happens at the beginning of the movie too. So it's sort of a shame that I wasn't necessarily fully involved at the beginning. But as the movie picked up and I got more of this dialogue, that again, I really loved the dialogue. I mean, such classic lines as "the ape blows while I clam." I mean, who doesn't like blowing apes and clams? So it's the dialogue really pulled me into whatever type of alternate universe this is, where high school students, instead of going to class, are involved in like shady drag wars and dad ex-girlfriend. It's a beautiful time. And plus the fantastic chase scene in which Gordon Levitt just sort of slides out and trips that guy. I mean, that was a pretty classy move. I really enjoyed that scene. So I enjoyed this movie at the end more than I thought I would based on the first 15 minutes. But I think it's going to take me a few more times to watch it until I can grasp every aspect that I may have missed this time around. But I think for now, I think a 7 out of 10 is pretty good. And this is a movie I can see going higher with a little more, I guess, focus next time I watch a movie. But 7 out of 10 seems like a pretty good time.
Yeah, it's just one of those movies that I think you have to see it multiple times just to really get everything.